Hey everybody, my name is Chris Tharp, and today I want to talk about your first game. So, there's a lot of tutorials out there for mid-level people, or even getting up there in a more advanced stage. I'm trying to focus on people that are just hitting their entry point. So, this is for people that want to get into game development but feel like it's daunting. And to be honest, it is daunting. There's a lot of factors and a lot of stuff. And that's why I want to talk about simplicity. That is the name of the game here. So I built this little game over probably like a day and a half of work, something like that. And the goal was A, to take a break from the main project that I'm working on and give me a second to reset, and B, make something as simple as possible. And I can't stress that enough. The first game that I ever made was sort of like a multiple choice, choose your own adventure type thing, and I animated everything and then had hyperlinks to be able to switch between things. It was pretty simple, just binary back and forth choices, but turned out to get pretty complex pretty fast. The second game I ever made was top-down maze game. It used mostly static sprites, so it was very basic, and then essentially relied on physics. And even that grew very complicated very quickly. So the thing to remember here is even if you start simple, things can get very complex. And so it's good to start from a very simple place. The game I'm currently working on, I started with a really simple idea, and even the last game I released, it's literally one input, kind of like having a toy puzzle box in your hand, and that still took me 2 months, 2.5 months, whatever it took me to be able to produce. So it's important to keep these things in mind. This is something that just chatting with my girlfriend about the simplest thing I could do, I built in like a day and a half. And it's not pretty, it's not amazing. As a matter of fact, a few people that have tried it said, meh, it's pretty okay. But that's not the point. The point is, it's a game. And if you've never made a game, then making any game is a huge accomplishment. And there's no way to understate the feeling that you get whenever you complete a project and say, I made a game. It's a special thing. So I just wanted to do a quick overview of this and how simple it is, and it's yet functional. So if I hit play up here. Alright, the game is essentially, tap to start, a two-player versus tap game. So it's like one of those tap counter things, but it's multiplayer. And I fancied it up a little bit. Clicking. Get the player 2 as the winner. And that's essentially the whole game. It goes in a loop. You have three possibilities. Either player 1 wins, player 2 wins, or it's a tie. Let's go ahead and tie it for fun. Too close to tell. Alright, so let's take a quick look at this project. And the reason we're looking at this project is because of its simplicity. This first scene, you can see I didn't even bother renaming the scene. Starts out as sample scene. I just started throwing stuff together. I was like, I'm gonna make something so simple that it's impossible to mess up, and it'll take 2 hours. So it took a day and a half. This has like what 12 to 15 objects in it, and then each subsequent scene for each output. So player one wins, player two wins, or it's a tie. They have less, even less, because they don't have any functionality. They literally play a little animation of some text that I drew up in GIMP, um, and then cut right back. So really, functionally, all that's happening in the entire game is there are two objects. We have this square here, which represents player 2 square, and this square here, which represents player 1 square. Those are the main functions, is just those two squares, and every time one is clicked, it essentially logs that click and then translates that into a text to be able to give you your output. So it is super simple. If you can start up Unity and put a square in there and work on giving it a click, then you got the game pretty much. In this particular case, like I said, it's a pretty simple one, but I am using Playmaker because I am not the best coder in the world. I'm not good at coding at all. And Playmaker is amazing for someone in my position, or for people starting out. I actually, the first probably month and a half of working on my first game, jumping back into this, so 4.5 months ago, something like that, I said I'm not going to use any assistance. I'm not going to use a node-based editor. I'm going to learn how to code the way you're supposed to learn how to code. And crazily enough, with a lot of trial and error and a couple tears, I actually was able to produce a pretty good chunk of the game that I was working on just using C#, Googling it, looking at tutorials, just learning how to do basic stuff. But pretty much before 4 months ago, I'd never done any coding at all. And after I'd gotten to the point where I could do the basic things that I needed to do, I was like, well, I'll just drop the money and get Playmaker so that I can speed up this process. And in a way, it spoiled me because there are things, like half the stuff that I learned, I've already forgotten because I'm not using those things every single day. But at the same time, it has sped up my ability to be able to produce things a ridiculous amount, and in a way helped give me a better understanding of those things. So if you haven't checked out Playmaker, I would suggest, especially if you're a newcomer to this whole thing, give it a try. It's great. There are alternatives. I know Bolt, a lot of people like that one. And Unity is supposed to be getting a built-in node-based editor soon, but I am not sure when. Either way, doing this particular function just in C# is not very complex. You can Google it, or we might even go over it because I could use a refresher and all that. But for the sake of this video, we are just going to talk about the actual function in the game and what it's built with. So literally, it's on click input on each square. You have a value per each one. That value goes up at the end of a timer. That value, or each value, is compared, and whichever value is greater, it transfers to the respective scene, player 1, player 2. And obviously, if there's a tie, I've got the too close to tell. Other than that, it's bells and whistles. I put a nice a little divider line to separate them, and then I just animated that using the built-in Unity keyframe animation system that we took a brief look at in a previous video. I believe it was Getting to Know Unity. So definitely check that out before you check this out. And then I guess a little more on the coding side, I did have it log the specific position of each click, and then just created an object in that position. And then I animated said object and just gave it a nice a scale up and a fade on the alpha channel as well, just to make it a little prettier. Let's see. Other than that, the only other things aesthetically, I kind of added a bit of a procedural system with the colors. I literally just took the post-processing stack, which you can get by going to the window and then package manager, and it'll be in there. And all I did was set up a number of those with different color variants to be able to change the default color. So we got that. And what it does, the reason that I did it this way is A, it was really easy and really simple, and B, it keeps everything uniform. So whatever contrast there is on your clicking object that appears whenever you click, it always holds up compared to the colors relative to it within the scene. Other than that, it's literally just clicking, and those clicks are counted. And this is the type of game that you want to start with. If you've never done anything, this is where you want to start, because I have that first project I was talking about where I'd committed to learning more about C# so that I was able to code better in Unity. Started out as just a little 2D platformer. I thought I'd maybe have a couple stages or something, and I ended up building villages and castles and courtyards and abandoned mine systems and underground dark and abyss systems and a cave with a boss battle in it and lava and all sorts of crazy stuff. And it got out of hand really quick. And so it's important to keep scope in mind. Even the current project I'm working on has gone way beyond the scope that I had originally planned, and I am constantly falling into the common trap, essentially, of perpetuating that scope expansion by continuing to go, ooh, what if I add this? Or, ooh, what if I add this? Or maybe if I change this and expand the story here a little bit. And you don't want to tell a story on your first game. You don't even want to make a good game on your first game. It's not a bad idea. Like, it's great to have the mindset to make a good game, but make something like this. Make a Pong game. I'd say make Tetris, but even that's a little complicated for your first game. You can make anything you want with this software, but it gets extremely complicated and overwhelming very quickly. So it's important to stay simple and keep your scope small, especially for your first game or even your first few games. Honestly, the people that have been dealing with this, doing this sort of thing for a while, they're going to tell you, keep your scope small. That is where it's at. And finish a game. And if you haven't started a game, start a game. If you want to, if that's something that you care about and you feel passionate about,